Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too.
So when I was in college, I used to work at this gym. It was part a CrossFit gym and then half physical therapy. And so when I applied for the job, I was looking to go to physical therapy school at the time. And so I was doing like hours where I was like shadowing different physical therapists and just going to different clinics and things like that. And they had this job opportunity where you could be a physical therapy, not an assistant, but a tech where you kind of help out around there. And so I interviewed for the job. And as I'm interviewing for the job, they actually offered me the job, and they told me, they were like, we don't actually have that position we talked about. We kind of got away from that, but you can still work the front desk if you're interested. You can kind of, help out around here and stuff. And so anyway, long story short, I took that job. And so I worked it for about a year. And so the shift was either like afternoon shift. I was either like after lunch, so early afternoon before dinner, all the way until close, or early morning. And so every single week, one of my shifts was I had to open up the gym, and the gym opened up at 5:30 each day. And so I had to be there early. I would get there, 5:10, 5:15, and there was always a few guys sitting out front in their cars, ready to go. The headlights are shining in through the windows. We still got 15, 20 minutes before opening. I'm getting, the laundry out from the day before. I'm folding that. I'm turning the lights on. I'm making sure everything is, cleaned up from the night before and all that. And these guys, it was the same guys every single day. And I don't know how long they'd been members of the gym. They could have been members for years. They were, 60, 70 years old, and they would come in every single morning, and there's probably 4 or 5 of them. They would do their workout. They'd be on the elliptical. They'd do some machines, and then they would take a shower. And I would always joke around with people because you always knew when they were there, because the facility is not super big. And where my desk was, where the front desk was, it was real close to the bathrooms there. And so every time they were there, I would know, because you could always smell the soap from the shower. It would kind of resonate throughout the entire facility there. And so these guys would come in and they would do their routine, and I would watch it. And at the time, this is before I was like training my own clients. It was kind of when I was first getting started and stuff. And so the routine was fairly basic. They would kind of do the same thing every single day. And so fast forward 10 years down the road, and there's this gentleman who it kind of lives a very similar lifestyle as the other men that would come into the gym, where he comes into the gym now that I train out of. Typically, I have clients early, 5:30 in the morning, or somewhere before 8 o'clock each day, where I'm getting everybody in. It's that way I can get home and get all the tasks done. So I work from home primarily, and so all my clients are now before 8 a.m. But this guy comes in, he's in there, but usually around 7, a little bit before, and he goes and does some machines. He's there the entire time. He doesn't really say much. He just kind of observes, watches what's going on, does his own thing. But if you talk to him, he's super friendly. He's actually in his 80s. He's a really great guy, really fun to talk to. But he does kind of the same thing almost every single workout, and then he'll go and I'll sit on one of the recumbent bikes, and then he heads out, and then he goes on with the rest of his day there. And so I bring this up because what these men are doing isn't necessarily ideal for building muscle, isn't necessarily the best program in the world. But the reason why they're so successful is because they do it consistently. The best program in the world doesn't mean anything if you're not going to do it consistently. And so these gentlemen, this guy that comes and works out at the gym now, he's in, like I said, he's in his 80s. The guys who were working out, the 10 years ago at the gym I was working at, them, it was, they were probably 70s, 80s. Some of them were younger. Some of them were store owners, kind of local business owners and things like that, would come in there, do their workout, and they would all know each other, because that was their routine, right? They were always there. If you've ever been at the gym early in the morning, the pre 6 a.m. crowd is always a lot of fun. That, they're knocking on the door, trying to get you to unlock it, while you're half asleep, opening, getting everything ready. The gym I train out of now, I have very few. The majority of my clients are online now, and I strictly have it that way because that's what works best for me and my family. And then I'm able to train clients from all over the country, which is really cool. But the clients that I still have in person, I've been meeting for a long time, and we actually go train before the gym is actually open, and so we have the whole place to ourselves except for one other trainer. She's there, but she's actually there from at 4:00, 4:30, does her own workout, then trains clients, and so she's definitely kind of on a different level there. But I bring this up because a lot of times, we get so stuck in trying to find, what the best workout program is, or, what the best, cardio modality. Should I be walking? Should I be running? Should I be jump roping? Should I be high intensity? Should I be do low intensity? Should I rest 1 minute? Should I rest 3 minutes? And none of that honestly matters too much unless you're a professional athlete, unless you're training for a bodybuilding competition, or unless you're training for a strongman competition, powerlifting competition, things like that. These things really do not matter, right? It's not going to make a huge difference in your life whether you rest 1 minute or whether you rest 3 minutes. Now, if you're trying to focus on strength, resting a little bit longer is going to help you recover more. It's going to help you be able to put more into your sets. But if you're just going for overall fitness, you're going for overall just, you're trying to feel better, you're trying to move better, you're trying to do more with your kids, then getting so caught up in what's the best program is just gonna lead to frustration, because you could have the best program in the world, and I have fallen for this too, trying to switch things up so much, where I have this very simple program. Mike Matthews is somebody that I've learned from. I've actually hired one of his coaches. If you've ever read any of his stuff, he wrote a book called Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. I think he has one called Thinner, Leaner, Stronger, which is geared more towards women. And then his latest one, I believe, I have not read it yet. It is called Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. I believe that's what the name of it is. But in his book, so I actually hired one of his coaches I worked with him one-on-one. So he kind of implemented a program for me. And so I had read his book. I knew kind of his modalities and things like that. But I've hired multiple coaches over the years because I just love, kind of learning new things. I only know, I only know what I know. Right. And so I actually hired a physical therapist, kind of they do their own thing. It's more of a one-on-one. And so it's kind of outside of insurance. It's very difficult to work one-on-one with a physical therapist if you go through insurance there, just kind of going through that process there. So I hired this guy. He has his own company. He lives in South Carolina. And so I'm going to start working with him. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I've had 2 hip surgeries in the past year. I had one last May, and I had one this past January. And so I've been in rehab for an entire year. And so I hired this guy to kind of work with me. I'm still having some lingering effects. I originally, I don't want to go too deep into it because that's not what this episode's about, but I originally injured my hip when I was 12 years old. So it's been about 20 years now since I originally injured it. And so obviously, having an injury, having a, just I was still growing at the times, just having compensations and things like that. And this guy kind of specializes in things like that. So I'm working with him. Obviously, it's more expensive to work with, somebody one-on-one like that. But, for me, it's very important because this is an issue that has been going on for, 2 decades, right? This has been going on for 20 years. And so, I hired him to kind of come in and help me and kind of work with me to kind of make sure, not only that I'm doing the right things, but I'm doing it with the right form, the right tempo and everything, because this has been an issue that's been affecting my life for, two-thirds of it now. And so that for me, this is something that, similar to like a bodybuilding competition or an athletic endeavor or things like that, this is very specific. And so that's why I hired someone specifically. But, for most people, stressing over whether you have, the perfect program or, if you're doing it for long enough, are you in zone 2 cardio, or are you in zone 3 cardio? You're getting caught in the weeds here. You're kind of missing the entire point, right? The entire point of working out, doing cardio, doing strength training and things like that is to feel better, is to move better, is to be healthier, so you can do more of the things that you want, right? If you're running around with your kids playing tag and you're not winded, I think what you're doing is working, right? If you're working out 3 days a week, but you're winded going upstairs, you're huffing and puffing, pushing a grocery cart and at the grocery store, things like that, like maybe we need to kind of rethink what's going on. And so I think we the state of the fitness industry right now is so far one way or the other. It's health at every size, or aesthetics only matter, or things like that. I'm not gonna put my opinion on what's best, what's not. What I'm saying is what's important to you is going to be the most important to you. And it sounds simple, right? Mark Bell was a powerlifter for a long time, and he's got a podcast, but he always says strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. And you're like, well, yeah, of course. But that's kind of the same thing what I'm telling you right now. What's important to you is what's important to you. And so if right now, the most important thing for you is you want to be able to lift 300 pounds on the bench press, then that's important to you. That's great. Once you achieve that, that's gonna increase some confidence. When you start building up to that, when you're able to do that, that's gonna carry over into everything you're doing, right? Could it benefit you to be able to run a 5K without walking? Sure. But if that's not something you care about, then you're probably not going to train for that consistently, right? Like those guys that would come into the gym at 5:30 in the morning. You watch their workouts. A lot of these guys, if you watch like a lot of older gentlemen do workouts, last summer I went to the gym and I was working out with the older gentlemen and the older ladies. I would when I was on crutches after my first surgery, and I was there at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it was packed. All the machines were packed, and that's all I could really do because I was on crutches. I'd use the elevator. I'd go up to the second floor. I'd use all the machines and things like that. And they were, they're doing half reps. They're doing all these things, but a lot of them are in really good shape. And, as a trainer, I would, if they were working with me one-on-one, we'd talk about, making sure we're doing proper form. We don't want to injure ourselves. But I mean, if you're showing up, 4 or 5 days a week to the gym, I can't knock you for maybe not doing everything perfectly, for not doing everything in the most efficient way. A lot of these people, there were people who were on machines for like 15 minutes doing like a chest press and things like that. They weren't working out the whole time. They're just talking to their friends and things like that. If that gets you to the gym, if that gets you, doing something so you can feel better, then, let's do that, right? I've had clients in the past who have told me, they're like, yeah, I just really like, exercise videos. I like doing like Shaun T's T25 Insanity like that. And I've done those too. I really enjoy the some of the cardio ones on T25. My wife was real big into Insanity. I did Insanity. She did T25. I did T25. And I'll still whip out some of those when I'm doing cardio because I can do it. I can literally do it in my office because they're so, they're high pace. They help with my cardio. That's something that I struggle with. And so I can do those. Obviously, I've been limited with my hips recently, but if that's something that, if maybe the bike, maybe, the rowing machine, maybe running, maybe all these things are going to be better for you. But if you're not doing them, then it doesn't matter. You have to do something that you actually enjoy. And so if you go to the gym and you only like machines, great. Do the machines. I had a client who they only wanted to do machines. And so I introduced dumbbells, I introduced cables, all these things to them. And they showed up and they were kind of like, yeah, like this is good, but I really like the machines. And so I was like, all right, well, let's do just machines. And they started working out 3 days a week. And I was like, let's do this. If you're going to do this consistently, let's make this the best for you. And you can get into an argument of what's best, machines or dumbbells or cables or barbell and all this stuff. It doesn't really matter if you don't do it. And that's the point I want to make here, is that the best program in the world doesn't matter if you're not doing it consistently. And so find something that you actually enjoy and stick with it. And once you do find it, just make sure, you keep with it, maybe add a friend. If you struggle right now, you really love going to the gym, but sometimes, you're not always consistent, bring your brother, bring your wife, bring your kids, if they're old enough to go with you, have them work out with you. If you're somebody, who struggle, for me, when I do cardio, if I'm running outside, I'm listening to either a podcast and an Audible book. Lately, it's been mainly Audible books. I really love music, so I'll listen to a lot of music. But when I'm at home and I'm doing the bike, I turn a show on. I've got two screens here. I've got kind of my main screen, and then I've got my avid screen here, and I'll put it on the screen. I actually have a TV in my office too, but it's actually smaller than my computer screen, or about the same size. And so instead of just switching everything over there, I just put it on the computer. And if I'm running on the treadmill, I'm watching a show or something like that, because it gets me to do it, right? And you can talk about, well, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be able to do that. It doesn't matter. What matters is what works for you. And once you find what works for you, just stick with it.
That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.